Hello, beloved. Welcome back to What's Up Wednesday. It's noon on Wednesday. That must mean that I'm going live. Glad you're here with me as we continue to ponder about those difficult decisions. We started talking about difficult decisions last week, and we talked a little bit about patience with everybody else's decision and just making room for other people to make different decisions than you do. And last week I said, I don't know how to make these hard decisions. And that's true. I don't know how to make good decisions in the face of imperfect and incomplete information in this pandemic. But I do know a little something about listening to the way God speaks into our life. And so I want to talk a little bit about that today. The practices I'm going to talk about are practices of faith, but you don't have to be a person of faith to use these practices. So regardless of where you are in your own journey and your own decisions about God and who God is and the origins of the universe and all that kind of stuff, you are still welcome to listen to this, because these apply to all of us. First, I have a confession to make. As I sit here talking to you and thinking deeply about pandemic and decisions and making hard decisions and all those kinds of things, I have to confess that in the back of my head, the song Helpless from Hamilton is just running around. Do you ever have one of those, what I call sticky songs? Sometimes people call them earworms. It's a song that is stuck in your head and it just won't go away. And every time your brain takes a pause, it starts singing a little tune. And actually that has something to do with difficult decisions today, even though it doesn't sound like it, even though I'm just confessing my Hamilton earworm. It actually does have a little something to do with what I want to talk about today. But I'm going to get back to that in a minute. The first thing I want to talk about is what I like to call the muddy mind. Imagine if you are sitting at the edge of a pond, and it's clear water all the way down for 6 or 8 inches down, and you can see the bottom of the pond. And perhaps you have a 6-year-old daughter like I do, and she comes along with a stick and begins to play in the pond. It won't take too long before that pond, that water right there in the pond is muddy, and it's no longer clear. You can't see the bottom anymore. And that's the image of the muddy mind that I want to think about today. My daughter has this little glitter bottle that she made at a school event of some kind, and it has glitter in it, so that I don't know if you can see that very well, but the glitter gets all turned around in the bottle. And then if you just leave it, I'm going to let it sit there for just a second. If you just leave it, the magic begins to happen. If you're a 6-year-old especially, it feels really like magic. But for those of us that aren't 6 anymore, we know what's going to happen, right? The glitter's all going to fall to the bottom, and the water's going to be clear again. When we begin to make difficult decisions, when we begin to try to hear how God is speaking into our lives and calling us into new challenges or into a new experience, or even just to try to be faithful in our day-to-day life, it sometimes gets hard to listen. Our minds get a little muddy. Our glitter gets all shook up. And there's so much going on that we can't really listen to the voice of God in our lives. We can't really hear even our own thoughts because there's just so much turned around. The muddy mind is not something that happens just during a pandemic, but I suspect you're a lot like me, that during a pandemic, when information is flying at you from 1,000 different directions, and when you don't know which information is the most accurate and the most up to date, and you want to be as informed as possible, and so you keep listening to all this information, it just is enough to make your mind really, really muddy. And so the practice of stopping, not much to it, just the practice of stopping, is something that's really important. The practice of stopping all of the intake, stopping all of the processing, stopping all of the stirring up of the mud in the pond, stopping all of the shaking of the glitter, is a really important one. It's the first step of beginning to discern. That's a good churchy word, a good theological word, a good spirituality word. To begin to discern God's will in our life, or to just begin to clarify our own thinking on any particular issue. What do I mean by stopping? I literally mean stopping. I literally mean sitting down in a corner of your room, sitting down in a corner of your house, sitting in a quiet place, waiting till the kids are asleep, and taking just 5 minutes of complete silence. You're sitting there wondering if your computer stopped, because I was being silent. And we get a little nervous when we start to think about silence, because we wonder if, shouldn't there be something happening? Shouldn't we be doing something? Shouldn't we be reading something? Shouldn't we be taking in something? But no, the practice of silence is really important in beginning to listen, in beginning to hear not only ourselves, but also the voice of God in our lives. And so what do we do in that silence, in that 5 minutes? Assuming we can carve that out of our day, and you can, I have faith in you. I know you can do it. Believe me, when you've got a 6-year-old who doesn't go anywhere, and when you don't go anywhere, it's hard to find 5 minutes of silence, but I have faith that you can find it. Before they get up, after they go to bed, turn off the TV, don't do the dishes yet, and sit. And while you're there, allow things to just settle. If something bubbles up, a thought or a worry or a concern, don't scold yourself. Don't get more anxious about it. Just say, and let it go. When something else bubbles up, just say, acknowledge it, and let it go. Sit in the silence and just be. Now, our answer is going to just magically appear out of the ether while you're sitting in silence? Maybe, but maybe not. Most likely what's going to happen is that in a daily practice of silence, your mind is going to be clearer and clearer and clearer as you continue in this daily practice of silence. And you're going to be able to hear your own thoughts. You're going to be able to hear your own realizations. You're going to be able to hear the promptings of God, not just in those moments of silence, but throughout your day, because those 5 minutes of silence are going to allow you more clarity in your day. So, what do you think? Is your mind like this, where everything is settled and all is calm? Or are you more like me, and you spend most of your time more like this? I should stop calling it the muddy mind, and I should start calling it the glittery mind. Maybe that would be more fun. But back to Hamilton, because I mentioned a minute ago that I had an earworm. A few weeks ago, I talked to you about red flags and how we watch for our own signs and signals that maybe we're getting off balance or off kilter. Actually, earworms are a really good sign. They're a green flag for me. They're not a sign of concern. They're actually a really good sign. Because if my brain is clear enough that it needs to fill the empty spaces with an earworm, it needs to fill the empty spaces with Helpless from Hamilton, which is my earworm of the day, then that means that my mind is clear. That means I have allowed all of the chaos to settle a bit. And it's not infesting all of my thoughts all day long. And my mind has enough clarity that it can pick up on other things. It can pick up on promptings of from the Spirit of God. It can pick up on hints from in my relationships about what's happening with them so that I can follow up. I can pick up on the subtleties of conversations. And most of all, I can pick up on the promptings of where God might be leading me and how God might be calling me to make the kinds of decisions that I'm having to make today and during this pandemic. I know that you're facing tough decisions too. We all are. The decision that if you're sitting on a church board of whether or not your church should reopen and do in-person worship, if you're not sitting on the church board, the decision of whether or not to go to in-person worship for yourself, the question of whether or not to send your kid back to school this fall, the question of whether or not you should go to the grocery store or have your groceries delivered. Everything is new and different and challenging during this time, and there's a lot of anxiety and fear. All of that can make our mind muddy. So this week, do me a favor. Find 5 minutes every day of silence, of just recognizing and acknowledging whatever comes up in your mind and letting it go, and recognizing whatever comes up and letting it go, and just allowing all the glitter, all the mud, all the whatever, all the chaos to settle so that your mind and your spirit are clear and you can listen for your own heart. You can listen for the voice of God in your consciousness, and you can move forward with confidence. And you could also hum along to Hamilton if you're so inclined. All right, I'll see you next week. Have a good week. Stay safe. Be careful. Be blessed.